This channel is part of the History Hit network.
I'm just near Middlesbrough, and over there is the River Tees. But hundreds of years ago, somewhere under all these lumps and bumps, there used to be a village called High Worsel. Quite a big village, it seems, although now all that's left of it is this little churchyard and a clutch of tombstones. But where were the main buildings? Was there a manor house? Who lived here? And why did the village just disappear off the map? Time Team have got just 3 days to uncover the story of High Worsel. So why are you sure that what we've got under here is an old village?
Well, because of the earthworks. So all these bumps and lumps are absolutely characteristic of village sites. This one in front of us, for example, is fairly typical of a house site.
This here?
Yeah, you see, and it goes across. If you go and stand at the other end, look, that's the sort of gable ends, and you've got to imagine this with a timber and thatched roof on the top.
It is pretty big, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look much on the ground, but it would have been a substantial building originally.
And when you say village, I tend to think of Duck Pond and Village Green and the little old tavern.
Yeah,
all
the
that.
forever Ambridge image, as I think of it.
How close is that to what we're likely to find?
That's a rather romantic image of really what relates to the post-medieval period, 1600 onwards. This is earlier. I mean, this may go back to the 12th century or earlier than that. It's occupied all through the Middle Ages, probably was abandoned at the end of the Middle Ages. You know, that's things for us to look at.
And how are we going to start?
Well, we've got to go and talk to the others to sort out the detail.
In fact, the others are already hard at it. Our site covers a huge area, so the geophysics team is at work in the middle of the earthworks trying to make some headway. And Stuart has been out since early morning, sizing up the lumps and bumps, trying to put some shape to them.
OK, what have you got then?
Mick, I've been looking at all the earthworks in this field, and it's a fantastic site.
It is,
it's actually
yeah.
stuff full of earthworks.
Yeah.
But what it looks like is a planned village. 2 planned rows, with one planned row up there, one planned row up there, back lanes at either side of them, with this big area in between, which is actually full of earthworks, which are really complicated.
Yeah.
But what's emerging really very quickly is that we've got a very strong row of buildings up here on the side of a hollow way, a main street, with paddocks out the back, all laid out symmetrically. And I've called that North Row, and they're very well preserved. Way over there is a very similar layout of a row of building platforms and paddocks behind, but that one is very poorly preserved. It's ploughed right down.
Yeah.
It seems we need to know if they're the same date and what date they were deserted
But I mean,
at.
this is the one that we should do more work on because this is already damaged.
But it's very ploughed flat, isn't it? We may get less evidence. So maybe if we're looking at both areas for the beginning, we'll know then whether we can get anything useful out of the area that's been ploughed. And we'll have this area to fall back on if it's
the bottoms of ditches and trenches will be well preserved in that because they won't have ploughed down to that level, will they?
Do you feel we should be putting a trench in up here, or would you rather leave that alone? I mean, it seems we...
Oh, come on, Lorenzo. I've just got out my precious archaeologist's meter and it's running into the red here.
But that's our concern.
OK, Mick, what are we going to do now?
Well, I think what we do is we put a trench in here and then you'll move off to the south row, do more geophysics there before we decide where to put any trenches in there.
Well, for goodness sake, let's get a trench started.
Come on. Once he's reunited with his spade, it doesn't take Phil long to cut through the turf and open trench 1.
Right, can we get on with this then?
It's an earthwork that looks promising at one end of North Row. At the far end of the site, over on South Row, John's looking for a promising spot to put in a second trench. He's looking for a similar house platform to the one Phil's digging. We hope that the finds from these 2 trenches will enable us to date both areas and discover whether these two rows were built and perhaps abandoned at the same time.
History Hit is like Netflix, just for history fans, with exclusive history documentaries covering some of the most famous people and events in history just for you. With familiar faces such as Dan Jones and Dr. Eleanor Yanega, we've got hundreds of documentaries covering the greatest figures and events of medieval history. We're committed to bringing history fans award-winning documentaries and podcasts that you cannot find anywhere else. Sign up now for a free trial, and Chronicle fans get 50% off their first 3 months. Just be sure to use the code Chronicle at checkout.
We nearly had you then.
Where are you off to, Robin?
Well, archaeology can only tell you so much about a site like this. We want to go off and dig up the historical record, which in fact can tell us an awful lot more than the archaeologist ever will.
Actually going to do a bit of work this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, you lot know a lot about archaeology, but I don't think you realise there's a real process to historical research, and that's what we're going to show you this weekend.
Yeah.
So what sort of things are you going to be looking at?
Well, we're going to be looking for evidence related to the manor of High Worsall, the parish of High Worsall, maps and plans, that sort of thing, hopefully.
And it's drier for armchair historians anyway.
Bit of detective work.
That's it.
Well, good luck, see you later. Bye.
Cheers.
Give us a ring if you find anything.
Will do! So I reckon we've got to try and find out what Doomsday says about the place.
I think we need to check whether there's a Victoria County history entry. I think that would help us.
Yeah, so that'll be the old North Riding of Yorkshire,
Yep,
won't
that's
it?
right, yeah.
Because we're right at the edge of it.
Are we going right or left here?
That's where the natural topography starts to.
No, this is
to
even
curve
clearer than
down.
this one.
There's a really biting wind out on the site now, and some people have already snuck into the incident room. Carenza, what are you doing?
Oh, well, we're just having a look at the air photos. They're absolutely fantastic. You can really get an idea for how the sort of geography of the site works. This is the building we were putting a trench in earlier. You can see, you know, it's obviously a rectangular building. It's really clear.
So North Row goes?
Right down there, that's the sort of front end of North Row with the houses up against the street, and the boundaries between the properties coming off at right angles from it. You can see how regular it is. It doesn't look so regular on the ground, but you look at it from above, it's a sort of planned housing estate almost. And then right the other side of the site, this is South Row, and you can see similar sorts of lines.
And these are the
That's
ghosts of the original plots?
Yes, the property boundaries.
Do you think that within the space of 3 days we're going to be able to unpick this story?
Oh, I think so. I mean, we've got stunning earthworks, we've got terrific air photography, we'll have geophysics to top it all up. I think by Sunday afternoon I can take you on a walk around this village, up the street, show you the houses, take you in the front doors and recreate what a medieval village will have looked like.
I'll take you up on that.
All right.
Sunday
I'm
afternoon.
confident.
I think we'll all do it.
Out on the road, the process of historical research is well underway.
Tell me, do you have a set of the Public Record Office calendars, the pattern rolls, close rolls and fine rolls, etc.? Oh.
While Phil's making good progress in Trench 1.
Is that the reference section? Yes, sure. Trying to give me another number. She's on a tea break? Oh, right.
And even this is still...
Still topsoil.
Yeah, still topsoil, yeah.
Cheers. It's like getting blood out of a stone.
At Trench 1, we've got our first find of the day.
First bit of pot.
Oh yes, that's nice medieval pot.
That's medieval.
That's medieval, yeah.
What, late, early?
Dates from about the 13th century through to the 15th century.
Yeah. And I mean, look at the edges. That's really, really sharp. I mean, that hasn't been ploughed or rolled around, has it? It's really, really crisp.
That's a bit of glaze, yeah, nice. Well, again, that's certainly medieval, yeah. What's interesting is that we're only getting medieval at the moment. We're not
that's
getting
it.
anything later.
Well, that's right, isn't it? So we may not be in a building that lasts beyond the Middle Ages, which would be useful, wouldn't it?
No, that's right.
So our first piece of pot from North Row tells us that this is a medieval building. From the shape of this earthwork, we can begin to tell what this building might have looked like. Victor is trying to flesh it out a bit for us. while Sue and Steve are trying to define the edges of the village by plotting the earthworks survey over the Ordnance Survey map.
Earthworks are, so we can just drop things straight down on top of it.
Relate to how we build up the village.
This is South Row, the part of the site with almost no earthworks left. Corenza's opening Trench 2 over what she believes is a house platform. Because this area has been heavily ploughed, she needn't worry about digging through the top layers quickly. She's looking for evidence that'll show whether North and South Rows were built and abandoned at the same time. It's quite scary in these things when there's a wind blowing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why did you get us up here?
Mainly to show you this area of the South Row, which is across here. You can see that right next to this field is a ploughed field. In fact, quite a few ploughed fields. One of our objectives is to find out how old the village is and whether there's anything here beforehand. We might get, for example, Saxon or Roman or even prehistoric material from walking across that field. And that's our only chance to do some field walking, which is a technique I do a lot and I enjoy a lot. It's very useful.
This is just getting gangs of people to walk across a field and see what's on the surface.
That's right.
It's a piece of Roman pottery. It's exactly the kind of thing we're looking for because it tells us that there were people living here before the medieval village.
What you got, Robin?
I thought we had a flint blade, but it turned out a piece of slate, but we do have a nice whetstone.
Oh, that's good. That's very nice, isn't it? Any idea of date of a thing like that?
Well, I'd say it's medieval, to sharpen knives and implements with in the medieval period.
Either there are more finds out in the field or people are getting better.
I think people must be getting better,
I think people are getting better. OK, so we're ready for the next line, are we?
We are, yes.
Robin Bush.
Hello, Alan Piper.
Dr. Hadley, Dawn to her friends.
Pleased to meet you. Right.
Now in Durham, Robin and Dawn are at last in touch with historical documents and can begin the process of piecing together the hidden history of High Worzel.
1531. There's John Sayer of Worzel.
Esquire, Armiger, yes.
As with many of these inventories, it lists it room by room. Yes.
They find a remarkable will. It belonged to the lord of the manor of Worzel and lists all his possessions.
With a good number of pots and pans in it and candlesticks. And then it goes on to list the man's outside possessions.
Crops in the fields.
Crops in the fields. We've got the cattle here, oxen and milk cows and their calves and so on.
This is the note of the gift of lands from William II to the Bishop of Durham.
Oh, hold on. Hello, Robin Bush here.
Robin, it's Tony. How are you getting on?
Oh, we're doing fine. We're in the most marvellous library of Durham Cathedral. We've got this wonderful quote written by the curate of High Worzel, who wrote a book on Cleveland in 1808. And he says, the chapel here, it seems, shared a similar fate with the village and continued in ruins till about the year 1719, when the present humble structure was erected out of the remains of the former. So that gives us a date, probably when the village had gone, 1719.
Listen, we've been coming up with 14th century pottery.
You haven't got anything from that kind of period, have you?
No, not specifically. We turned up the will and inventory of a John Sayer
living in the manor house at High Worzel in 1531.
Can you see if you can get us some more of that earlier medieval stuff?
Absolutely.
Well, if you get anything tonight, give us a bell, all right?
OK, Tony.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, I suppose all we can do is plough on backwards.
Quite.
OK.
Over on South Row, things are moving on quickly. We've already hit the natural soil in Trench 2 with no finds at all. So we decide to try two more trenches here, Trench 3 and Trench 4. Trench 3 is over what should be the very edge of the village. We're looking for a ditch here in which we might find early pottery. Corenza is marking out Trench 4, which is across a ditch marking the boundary between two houses.
So it goes up the middle
Meanwhile, back in our first trench in North Row, Phil has uncovered a strong stone feature, but it runs across the centre of the building and not on what we thought were the outside edges. I thought whatever was under here would be the same shape as this little hillock we're on.
Yeah.
But the stones aren't. Why not?
Don't know. They should be.
we think the same.
Well, end of day one and we've got a mystery.
I'd have put money on there being walls under these banks.
Should have been a stone wall under that bank.
But this is really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean,
then why are we spending so much time about 200 yards over there where it isn't?
It is interesting over there. I mean, we've got a trench being opened up to see where the boundary ditch is, because the boundary ditch may have the earliest material in the bottom of it, which will give us some information about the date of the plan. And you've got another area opened up that's got a similar.
You've got three trenches opened up there now.
So
yeah,
far,
but we can get into it. We can excavate that area much more freely because it's more damaged. The earthworks in good condition. We must be careful with this area.
We've got one eye on the fact that these are well-preserved earthworks, which we want to keep. I mean, what they've done over there, in fact, is playing off a lot of this, getting us down to the lower levels that are going to answer the questions about when it was founded, how it was laid out.
So what are we going to do tomorrow?
We're going to carry on over there. You're on about... No?
If you want to. You're the chief archaeologist.
Yeah, because, you know...
I just think it's a waste of resources, but you're proving me wrong.
Why?
Because I think that the only reason you're not concentrating on this area of the site is because you want to demonstrate that you don't want to do too much damage to the most interesting part.
And
I think it's madness because you've got so much of it and that you could actually make very neat sections in here.
We can't dig it all in one weekend. We want
Exactly, so let's go, you know, it seems to me like you're saying, I've got a whole basket of plums here and I'll eat the bad ones because I don't want to spoil the good ones.
But neither are we going to use these earthworks to answer the questions we set out with if we can get the same answers from the damaged part of the site. He's not convinced.
No. Well, end of day one, I've been beaten hands down by anally retentive archaeologists. Join us after the break when hopefully we'll be able to crack the puzzle of this mysterious trench.
Limited.
Yeah?
Get off.
I'm feeling really happy this morning. Last night I was winding the archaeologists up, partly because I felt that they were being ultra-conservative in not being prepared really to excavate in what I considered to be the plum area of the site, and partly because I was frightened that we were going to spend the whole weekend exploring the lumps and bumps on the surface without really being prepared to get underneath to find out what the archaeology was like there. Well, overnight they've conceded that we can put in a new trench here in what I think is a really interesting part of the site where we haven't dug yet and where there's some very interesting earthworks. This is where we put in our first trench on North Row. This is where we are now on what we're calling the Western Zone, and John and Stuart are just working out precisely where we should put the trench. The area we're now looking at is here, just west of the church. The geophysics team is collecting data from it, while Stuart begins to examine the lumps and bumps. The earthworks on this part of the site are very different. They suggest a group of buildings in a settlement. We know that somewhere on this site there was a manor house. Some of us are beginning to think that it may be around here. In Trench 1, Phil's back at work trying to make some sense of the mass of stones he's come across. Is there a wall to this building in here somewhere? And across in South Row, Carenza's still looking for the dating evidence we need. Trench 4's getting longer, but there's no sign of a ditch yet. We also decide to extend Trench 3 in our hunt for a boundary ditch at the edge of the village. From the air, the site looks impressive. You can clearly see our Trench 1 at this end of North Row.
You can see, you can pick out quite a few houses along it. Those little rectangular platforms going right out to where the grass gets more yellow.
Southern Row is where?
It starts at the very green field beyond the barn. It's that strip running right the way across.
And the Western Zone is on the far side of the big square, which is the church?
Yeah, across the other side of the church, yeah.
would you expect to find such a big church site slap bang in the middle of a medieval village?
Well, you'd expect to find one, but not apparently on the village green or in the middle of the village like that. You might expect that to be where the manor house was originally, and then the church built next to it, and then the village coming later on. That would be quite a normal sort of sequence.
It's a beautifully compact site, isn't it?
Fantastic, isn't it? Yeah.
Phil's extending Trench 1. He knows he's definitely excavating a building, but these stones don't make any sense. The extension is a good move that soon pays off.
This is all stony.
Yeah.
Oh, you look, there's an opening up there.
It's an edge.
Do you think we got the edge of a wall? Is that possible? This you could mattock there. It was just peeling off with a mattock. You go through it here, you can see there's different colour. And like there is an edge there. You know, look at the way that roots. Look at the way that root run up the side of it. It is, isn't it?
Yeah, spot on. So you should be able to spot it in
Wow,
plan.
that's right. We should be able to follow it then.
Oh look, yeah, here is.
Yeah.
That's sort of cracking along there.
That's it.
Same thing.
Phil, we saw from the air that you're extending this trench.
Yes, we've got a very good reason for extending this trench, actually. We really don't understand what those stones are, so there's the only way to find out is to come straight over this bank and actually try and find out what's happening to the stones through here and actually try and find the edge of the building. Now,
so you might get the end wall here.
Well, this is what we're so excited about. Look. Yeah, you see over here we've got this sort of a greyish brown material. Now, you see, when you come down onto here, look at that. It's a very moist, wet, quite nice, rich brown clay.
Isn't it? Yeah,
That's
very
right.
clayey, that
and
bit,
can you
isn't it?
see there's an edge coming across here? You can follow it as a crack. I'm pretty sure that this is a good possibility of being the centre of the wall, and that this down here is the collapse of the wall outside.
Right. Are we thinking of this as a clay-walled, cob-walled building now then?
Looks like we might be. We haven't found any evidence of on the bank over there of the sidewalls of any stonework.
No.
Yeah. What's cob walling?
Well, you know, mud and straw. You know, very much like the West Country today. Lay a layer down, let it dry. Lay another layer down, let it dry. What they say about it is, as long as you keep its head and its feet dry, you know, you put some foundations in, you put a cap on.
As long as you've got a nice big eave over the top of it, so that the actual base of the wall doesn't wash away and erode.
All those
perfectly
picturesque
good.
cottages in Devon, a lot of those are built of cob, which is basically mud, lumps of mud, isn't it?
And I mean, if you're going to build a house, you build a house with the materials that's locally available.
Yeah.
And if they got clay here and it works, that's what they'll use.
We might actually have
Now that we know these are cob-walled buildings, Mick can give Victor a much better idea of what they may have looked like.
Now, we can have sort of just angled timbers, sort of like that, you know.
It's just roughly hacked out.
Well, probably split trees actually,
Yes.
but yeah, so we can put a thatched roof on, something like that, you see.
Yeah. Give it a bit more shape like that.
Yeah.
In South Row, Carenza uncovers a pot which turns out to be a very significant find.
We should be able to piece it back together again. But what's nice is that it's come out of that end of that trench quite high up, so it's giving us a sort of final layer of our final date of occupation.
And what does this tell us about the story of the medieval village?
I think what's interesting is that we're now getting the same date of pottery from both sides of the village, so we're not getting any distinction between when one side was abandoned and when another was abandoned. So it may be that we've got it getting buildings abandoned at much the same time.
So this pot confirms a final date of occupation in the medieval period. But we don't find any evidence of when our village was first built. We decide to pull out of South Row altogether. It's a small victory for me over my ultra-cautious friends. Back in the incident room, there's an air of excitement. John and Stuart have finished looking at West Row and they're both saying the same thing. So what you got for us, John?
These are the resistance results. North Row, South Row.
John has an area of high resistance just west of the church.
Coming through at this point.
This is the earthworks. It's saying much the same thing as the geophysics.
And from the earthworks, Stuart is pretty sure that this is an important part of the site.
It's been a defined area, like a manorial complex.
The computer has the final piece of the jigsaw, the detailed geophysics results.
Technical hitch.
If only we can get it to work. This is the bit that you don't often see in Time Team. We say we've got just 3 days to do this. So much of the 3 days is spent actually waiting for various bits of data to be processed, and when the software doesn't fit in with the hardware.
It'll print straight out from this one, won't it? We haven't tested that printer driver. We're just about to, I think, actually. Go on. Because it's ready on this. Just slap it on the back. Just slap it on the back, and I'll change the printer.
Well, it's 1:05, so we're exactly halfway through this Time Team.
Oh, there we are. Well done.
Technology. In effect, what we've got is a band of high resistance, and it goes up, and this is the causeway that Stuart's talking about. This is the holloway, the ditch that goes down.
Like that,
The reason why everyone's starting to get so excited about this area, I suspect, is because you think that this might be a high status area. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I think that's very much the way it's starting to...
And one of the key components in villages of this date is one's the church and one's the manor house.
Would you be happy to do a little exploratory excavation there?
I think we might have the time, but I would still want to spend most of the effort on that top platform, because if we've got a manor house and it's early and all the rest of it, you know, then we've got to try and sort that out in the next day and a half.
So when you're talking about excavating this platform, that actually could be the floor of a manor house?
Well, presumably, or stone rubble from it. Well, that would be our only stone building on the site at the moment.
So we begin our search for the manor house. We open up Trench 5 on a large, promising earthwork just beside the church. Mick decides to check with Robin, who's in Middlesbrough Library, to see whether we're on the right track.
Hang on a
Sorry
sec.
about this. This is terrible, taking a mobile phone call in a library. Oh, dear. Hello, Robin here.
Robin, it's Mick. Where would we expect the manor house to be? I mean, would we expect it to be near the church or somewhere else?
Well, to be honest, I would always expect the earliest manor house to be cheek by jowl with the church.
Right. Yeah.
So I reckon you're looking at a possible pre-conquest site which continues in use in one form or another through to the period of your village.
Right, that makes sense. OK, mate, we'll speak to you again about it later on. Cheers then. See you then. Yeah, he reckons that it would have been, the church would have been by the manor house because the Lord would have built it and wanted it right next door. And at that date, it could be earlier than the village.
Sorted.
So that's great, isn't it?
It's exactly what we wanted to hear.
Well, we just got to wait and see what the archaeology produces now.
At Trench 5, the archaeology is already beginning to show results. We're detecting small metal finds in the spoil heap, some of which turn out to be very instructive. And we're coming across stonework, which is different from the other stones found on the site, which suggests a different type of building. It now looks more likely that this is the manor site, so Victor begins to put some shape to it. Back in the outside world, Dawn and Robin are still on their epic trek around the libraries of the northeast. They're focusing on the manor. Who might have lived here?
King Henry to William de Vesci of all the possessions, including Wurzel.
And what would it have looked like?
That's the wrong one.
It's reference to the inheritance of William Sayer of Wurzel, Esquire, and who should be his right heir and what age, and of whom the land should be holden of.
Down at the river, two men are up to their knees in water. Mick, sensibly you might think, keeps dry the modern way, but Mark, a member of the White Company, sticks to medieval practice and takes his trousers off.
Right.
And the basket is in that way. So they're going to be funnelled in through this V here.
Yeah, yeah.
Go up into the basket.
Well, I thought it should be that way round to catch them as they come down
yes,
the river.
you think so, but...
Vic!
Hi there!
We're low on time, we're short of labour. What are you doing?
Fishing.
What, would people from our village have fished down here then?
Yeah, well, only with the Lord's permission, yeah. They would have used, well, Mark, rods
well,
like this?
very, very simple rod. There's no reel on this. It's just a long stick with a string on it, but this is actually horsehair, the line's horsehair. And on the end of the hook, we have that there, and we can tell this. There's a book here from about 1487, which it shows you everything, how to make your rod, your line.
And there's the...
So Bodder's reconstructed the hooks.
Modern replicas, you see.
There they are, fishing away. Have you caught anything yet?
Yes, we've caught 3 fish. We've caught a nice eel, a flatfish and a chub. I think the eels are most significant because we hear of those even in Doomsday Book, people catching large numbers of them.
Yeah,
but this is really the business here, look, Tony, because Madeline here is making a wickerwork trap, and most of the fishing, as far as we can see, was done by building like that thing out the back there in the river, across the river to support these, and you left them in the water to catch the fish overnight.
So how did this work then?
Well, hopefully your nice big fat sea salmon or trout is going to come up here. He's going to be funneled into this trap by our hurdles, come all the way up to here, get to the end, which Madeline's going to close and finish off. Can't go any further. Now there's not enough room for him to turn round, so he's going to back up. At which point he gets his poor little gills trapped in all these little sticks here, and this basically gets wedged in until I come along in the morning and have him for breakfast, or probably the Lord of the Manor has him for breakfast.
Almost certainly the Lord of the Manor, because it was a very jealously guarded privilege to have the fish out the river. They probably would have put stones in it in the Middle Ages, Mark.
Yeah.
Just I don't know whether it's necessary, but we find them with the stones in the bottom. So we've got to push that down. Yeah, I think it's going to need some stones in it, don't you think?
Yeah.
In Trench 1, Phil's at last beginning to figure out the complexities of these stones.
And then we got this nice walkway down here, paved, coming down here, and then going on through underneath.
Now that he knows where the walls are, it's clear that the stones are flooring. It's already the end of day 2, and only now do Mick and I get our first chance to visit Trench 5. I know we've had some great finds from here, but what's the story of this trench?
I don't know, because I've been in the river all afternoon. How have you got on then, Robin?
Hello there. Well, if you remember, we decided to put a trench in here to find out if this was a manorial enclosure.
Yeah.
And what we've got here is a building. You can see down there we've got a post pad, and that would have been used to been put on the ground. You've had a post stood on that, which would held the building up.
So stop it pressing into the ground with the weight of the roof and everything.
That's right, yes. We've got cinder, we've got pottery, we've got bone, so we've certainly got a building there.
Do we know what sort of building it might be?
Well, the metalwork's very high status. It looks as though it should be the house of the Lord of the Manor.
So we think we found the manor.
Yeah.
What a great way to end the day. Can I tread on your trench? Sure. So it's been a really good day. Everyone's worked fantastically hard. We've closed down some trenches, we've opened up some others, and these are our high status finds from this trench. 1 silver medieval coin and 1 silver medieval pin. Not a bad way to end the day. Beginning of day 3, it really is a bit parky up here, isn't it? What is it that you want us to look at?
Well, we've got this trench open down here that we opened yesterday. You see, we've got this sort of ditch coming up round here, and then it turns a corner there and comes across. And we get these on deserted village sites. Often there's actually a moat full of water around them, but this is the wrong place, the wrong geology for that. But I think that's what it's doing. It's defining an enclosure within which there would have been the manor house, the service buildings, a big barn, you know, dovecotes, outbuildings and all the rest of it. And we've just got one little sort of look into that.
So what are we going to do on this part of the site today?
Well, I think we might do a bit more excavation, perhaps over in that area over there.
Yes!
But much more important, right, is to make sure we've got all the earthworks accurately plotted, because there's a lot of bumps and lumps up here which will help us to understand it as well. And I'm an earthworks man in the end, you know. I mean, I like these little bumps and lumps 2 inches high.
What What are you two doing here? You're supposed to be doing the tour of the libraries of Teesside.
Haven't you heard about Sundays? Record offices close, librarians go home and meet their families. So we've come back here to analyse everything we've turned up in the last 2 days.
Well, this is what Mick reckons was the manorial site
Sure.
in the medieval period. Have you found any references to a manor around here at all?
Oh, certainly. In 1401, a family called Sayer inherited the manor and decided to live here.
So that means that there must have been a manor here before that.
Oh, yeah. There was in terms of an estate, we can go right the way back to the Norman Conquest.
And what do you think would have been on this site?
Well, it didn't necessarily have to be residential. I mean, don't forget, a manor is essentially an estate. And on an estate like that, you're going to need somewhere for people to pay their taxes and for there to be a manor court, though it wouldn't necessarily be a manor house. But it could be a large building in which lots of people could gather together. It could have been a very large structure nonetheless, so.
Just beside Trench 5, we open up another exploratory trench. It's on a small earthwork that's also thrown up very strong magnetic resistance on John's geophysics. It may be an important building in the manorial complex. In any case, it may also help us to define the extent of the complex. Meanwhile, Stuart has analysed the earthworks across the whole site, and he throws up a fascinating proposition.
Oh, look at that, it snowed on it.
This is the result of the earthwork survey. These are the key elements of the medieval village. These regular layouts down here and here are part of the planned layout of buildings and their gardens and so on, with regular roads and back lanes. Then the earthworks, there's a different plan form over here, which is a sort of squarish layout, which we thought would be a manor site, and it appears to be turning out to be so in this area here, and the church next to it, which is we know the site of anyway. What we're left with over here is an area that's very irregular. You see, it's all curvy, different shapes and lanes, which are very different to everything else. But these are very interesting because the regular layout is wider at this end than this end. And I wonder if when this was laid out, it's because there's something already here, i.e. an earlier village than our North Row and South Row elements.
Are we likely to come up with any archaeological evidence to support the idea that that yellow bit is an older village?
Yeah, I mean, if we put a trench in that area and we get early pottery, then that will obviously help the argument.
And we've got time to do that?
I think so, yeah. Right. That'll probably be the last one we do, in fact, in that area.
Another trench.
I'll have to put something in his tea.
So Carenza and Stuart try to decide which earthwork might reveal the oldest part of the village most quickly.
I was thinking this platform, which is cut by, was this bank here?
Yeah.
Which cuts across this mound. I mean, therefore the mound must be earlier than this bank, at least.
That's
I mean,
right.
I wonder if...
yeah, we've got two lanes either side. We've got two windy lanes. It feels like sticking a pin in, but I think this is the best shot we've got in this area at the moment with the time we've got.
Well, if we put in a trench that starts here, and we line it up in that direction... So
while they stick a pin in, I catch up with Phil in Trench 1.
Wow. You can see we've got this magnificent clay wall, and then slap bang in the middle of the building we've got this paved surface running right the way through the middle. The amount of material we've had out of this surface, I mean, you can see masses and masses of debris. You see, look at all these bone, masses and masses of pot.
And this is all medieval, is it?
Yeah, there's certainly all this is exactly the same potteries we've been having throughout. And look what we had this morning.
What's that?
A spindle whorl. It's what people would have used for spinning the wool. You've got a shaft, wooden shaft running through there, and it's what you would have used to make your yarn.
What sort of date do we think we're looking at for this place?
Most of this pottery is probably about the 14th century. So, you know, that's... And it's all the same.
So what do you want to do? Yeah.
Well, effectively, it's nearly finished. We want to clean it up. The sections will be drawn, photographs, and then that'll be it.
And what are you going to do for the rest of the day?
I suspect I'll probably find a bit more digging to do, Tony.
OK, OK, then can we just agree on some of the more important dates we want to talk about? Because
Robin and Dawn have just a few hours to assemble all the information they've managed to find over the weekend. They're putting together a chart, a picture of life in the village. From this, they hope to be able to work out when and why the village died.
I'd be happier to start with 1146, which is definite. So chapel at Wurzel, or at W.
All right, yep.
And then you can put 1094-5.
Yeah, got that.
Allerton claimed to have chapelries.
OK.
Out on site, our final 2 trenches are well underway. Carenza's opening a trench at the spot identified by her and Stuart. Our hope is that this might be part of the earliest village settlement, predating the planned village, which we know to be medieval. While up in the manorial area, Phil already has a useful find.
Actually getting just that bit cleaner.
What have you got? Henry VIII groat, 1544.
Yes, here's his crown with these sort of little spiky bits on the top. And you come down, there's his hair streaming down the back, sort of bob style really, isn't it? There's his nose, and just his eye very faint, and like you said, his chubby little chin. It's in wonderful condition, isn't it, eh?
In medieval times, fish was a very important part of the diet, especially here in a village right by the river. Mick and I catch up with our medieval fishermen.
Great scene, that, isn't it?
It's wonderful, isn't it? Mark, how'd you get on?
Well, not so good with the trap, but Bodger, you want to bring that basket of fish up? We've caught quite a lot more with the rod, basically. So
what was the problem with the trap?
Well, it's not really a medieval river anymore. It's too deep. The water level has dropped from the banks, but it's very deep in the middle. The salmon like something.
Yeah, it's presumably no salmon in it, or not enough salmon these days.
Well, apparently 3 or 4 a year the local anglers catch.
So right.
We weren't really.
So you got nothing at all, basically.
Yeah.
Well, can't complain about that.
Now what are these?
Well, there's a big eel at the back still.
There are eel here, and these are all chub, isn't it, Roger? They're chub.
So, from my point of view, being a vegetarian, you'll be throwing them back.
Oh yes, they'll go back in the river. But we do have a bit of rice for you.
Oh,
and,
that's nice.
What we've also got is a salmon that we've, in the best interest of television, one we caught earlier.
Shall we put that back in the river?
There we are.
So what's that, in a clay covering?
Well, this is actually in salt dough. Just pastry with a lot of salt in it, really.
Oh.
Inside here, hopefully, is going to be a cooked salmon.
We've got to crack it open somehow.
We've got to crack it open. This has just been cooked in the ashes of the fire. So we...
Yeah, I mean, fish was terribly important in the Middle Ages as part of the diet.
Oh, what's this inside?
Aha, there we are. There's your salmon.
But this stuff, what's this?
This is stuffing. There's breadcrumbs, there's onions, sultanas.
Fruit by the look of it.
Herbs and spices. It's quite a sort of sweet and sour stuffing, this one.
Would the poorer people have had fish as well, or would they have just been the preserve of the rich?
Oh no, everybody would have eaten fish.
Salmon was incredibly common. Everybody had salmon and probably were quite sick of it. There was legislation, in fact, in the 14th and 15th century that said you couldn't feed your apprentices salmon more than 3 times a week. A bit different from today.
Yeah.
Right. Should be. The salt dough's kept all the juices in, all the steam.
Oh, you've really got the taste. It is lovely. On telly, people always taste things and go, "Oh, it's lovely," don't they? But this is very nice. Yeah.
But imagine what the medieval cook would do. Take this to the table, open it all out, and the lord of the manor will be hit by this huge cloud of salmon-scented steam, basically.
I can smell it now. To you, it's probably anathema, but to me, it's the bee's knees. Well, the salmon's gills. You don't know what you're missing, Mick.
1354. You know, when you set everything out like this, it's fascinating how those 14th century entries come together and make you realise what a hive of activity the place was around that time.
Yeah, there's so much going on in High Wurzel. We've got murder, we've got robbery, we've got men poaching fish. I mean, even the chaplain's in on it.
Yeah. When you add that reference to the creation of a park in 1354, it honestly makes you wonder whether, having suffered all the slings and arrows of outrageous Bannockburn, bad harvest, Scottish raids and finally the Black Death, whether the creation of that park wasn't the final death knell of the village, when they flattened everything and just turned it into a gentleman's country park.
Well, it's one of the better ideas that we've come up with this weekend.
We'll never be able to prove it.
Of course.
But I reckon it's as good a theory as any.
Back in the incident room, the finds are giving us important pointers to the story of our village. This scraper is from the Field Walk and dates back 3,000 years. But most of the pottery we've collected is medieval, like this pot found by Phil in Trench 1, and this jug found by Carenza. These firmly place our planned village in the Middle Ages. Along with the bigger finds, these pieces prove that there was a manor here, a silver pin and a medieval coin. There's an air of excitement on the site now, with lots of people turning up to look at what's going on. In our final trench, Carenza thinks she's got something.
Yeah, that's very exciting. It's certainly earlier than anything we've seen before.
How date?
Well, it could well be Saxon-Norman.
Really? So that's 10th to 12th century sort of
That's
period.
right, yes. It's a thinner fabric, it's slightly grittier, and the rim is a different shape. So it looks different, it looks earlier. So the idea that there may be an earlier settlement on the green looks as though it might have something going for it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I'd better leave you to get on with it.
I think so, yeah.
This is a crucial find. This pot predates anything else we've found on the main site. Our last trench confirms the existence of an earlier settlement. This is the trench that we hoped that Mick was going to dig in what we believed to be the oldest part of the site.
Yeah.
And you're dead pleased that we dug it, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a corker.
Yeah, it's produced early pottery for this irregular area between the other rows, which seems to indicate we've got a different settlement here. That's fantastic.
And why are you so excited about that?
Well, because a lot of us have spent years looking for something like this. I mean, the project I've been running down in Somerset, we spent 8 years looking for this sort of evidence. We haven't found it.
Because you thought that there used to be early higgledy-piggledy settlements?
Yeah, we're fairly sure there's been a change in the way villages have been organised, from rather irregular settlements to much more planned, carefully laid out ones. And that seems to be what we've got here.
What would it have been like around here?
We'd have lots of little lanes running through. That's what these hollows are. They're little hollow roads that have got worn out with the traffic over the years. And I think we should see the odd cottage and farmhouse dotted about, so a much smaller settlement altogether, rather like just a group of little farmsteads.
On day one, Stuart promised me a tour of the village, so Mick and I go back to North Row to take him up on the offer.
What do we think it looked like then, Stuart?
Well, at the beginning of the weekend I was hopeful that these earthworks would allow us to recreate the medieval village, and that's exactly what's worked out. We're standing down here in the main street. The cottages on North Row are on the right-hand side of us here.
Yeah.
We're walking through a living tapestry of buildings and medieval life here. As you walked up the street, the church will be there on the left-hand side, where the churchyard is now, and up behind it will be the manor house dominating your view up here. Another house there, and there's one of the larger long houses just here, Tony, in front of us.
Shall we go up and have a look at it?
Yeah. If you walked up here, you'd be going straight towards the front door, presumably.
Yeah. We would have come up through the door, which of course might have been locked. We find lots of locks in excavations. And then at this end, if it was a long house, would have been where the cattle would have been. And only 2 or 3 perhaps, with a drain down the middle to take the effluent out. And then there would have been a passage here with a doorway out to the garden. And on this side would have been the hearth, where the family would have lived all around this, probably with a sort of half loft or something under a great thatched roof, where they could sleep up there, or they could store, you know, apples and cheeses and next year's seed corn and so on. And if we went through the back door here, we'd have gone out into the yard, which went right as far as the little bank, probably with a hedge on it, out to the back there. First of all, they must have had somewhere to grow some onions and garlic and leeks, because we hear about those. We know they ate a lot of cabbage and brassica type things, so we probably expect a little garden in this area here, I would have thought.
Yeah.
But we also know that they needed pasture for the few sheep they would have kept. So out at the back, it would almost certainly have been grass, but there probably were fruit trees as well. We know that if they had about 6 or 8 apple trees, they could produce enough cider for their own use of the family through the year. So all this lot would have helped to support the family living in the house.
And there would have been at least 20 of these habitations in this one village
That's
alone.
right, in the planned element of the village, that's right, yes.
We've got this beautiful 400-year-old coin, but by the time it was accidentally dropped in this field, the village had disappeared. Do we know when it vanished?
Well, in 1354, the then Lord of the Manor, Thomas Seaton, created a deer park in this area. Now that's only, 4 or 5 years after the Black Death. We know the villages in this area, and probably this one, were in decline as a result of Scottish raids, bad harvests and so on. Perhaps in that year, 1354, they decided to cut their losses, flatten what was left, and create a lovely park here. It's only a theory, but it's the best one I've heard this weekend.
Well, there's nothing we've had from the archaeology that disagrees with that would disprove that. And what the archaeology has shown us that the history hasn't been able to tell us about is the earliest phase of the village. This trench in the middle of the site shows occupation here between the 10th and 12th centuries, sort of either side of the Norman conquest.
So we've actually got both the origin of the village from the archaeology and something of the decline. We've got the complete history of the place. And the other great bonus is we've had lots of earthworks. We can actually see the patterns of everything. And they, if nothing else, give us a lot of information about everyday life at that time.
So we've learned an awful lot about the story of the village over this weekend. We've had some fantastic finds. We found a manor house, and we found not one but 2 villages. Not bad for a chilly October weekend.